Vic Matus is co-host of Getting Hammered podcast, the must-listen-to podcast that the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I share in common, the one that overlaps because it makes us laugh and it just keeps us entertained, and Getting Hammered is a must-listen-to in the Hewitt household. Vic, however, used the last episode to unbend about his Hallmark years, those years that had previously been hidden from biographers and kept under the rug, including... I hope your boss has gone to the Angels, because if he listens to that, Vic, he might get the impression that you didn't like working for him.
No, not at all. Yeah, I don't know if he's around anymore. He was a tough guy, but I like working for tough bosses. I do. I mean, tough but fair. That's all I ask for is tough but fair. I used to work for John Podhoretz, tough but fair.
Well, I've had some great bosses. I've had some not great bosses, but generally, you got to have both to grow up and live a full adult life. Let me ask you, Mary Catherine and I had the same first job in college. I delivered newspapers for 8 months until I fell on my butt so many times when the sidewalks iced over in Boston that I said, no more Globe for me. In terms of first, did you work every year that you were in college?
No, I had internships. I did work. I worked at the Justice Department after my freshman year at Georgetown. And that was under Bill Barr 1.0. So that was
How
very
did you get
exciting.
a DOJ internship?
They were looking for any kid from a college Republican program in the D.C. area. I was the only one that happened to be there on campus at the time. And rather than me asking, does anyone want it, I just took it. For myself.
Have you read, I think I've got it right here, General Barr's memoir? It's the best memoir of any memoir of the Trump years. Absolutely fabulous memoir. Did you read it yet?
Yeah. As many journalists would say, Hugh, I've read in it.
Well, I've read all of it, and he has in it a theory that secular humanism is itself a religion, that it ought to be banned from the schools because it is being taught in the schools by our left-wing woke teachers union types. And he's absolutely right. I just don't know who has standing to bring that lawsuit. Vic, give us your view from 30,000 feet about 8 days from now. I feel like it's 2016 for the Republicans, meaning Democrats in 2016 got the shock of their lives, and I think, gosh, we're in danger of getting one of those.
Yeah. The first thought that's coming to my mind is that I think Americans are beginning to realize that the Empress has no clothes. So they've been telling us all this time about how great, Kamala Harris is, and they roll out all the celebrity endorsements, and isn't this wonderful? And, when she comes into office, she's going to get tough on the border. People are like, wait a minute. It doesn't take a genius to realize that she is in office right now. And what has she done? And are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And that's really the message I think that the Trump team has been driving home. And I think we're beginning to see those indicators go in his direction. He's peaking at the right time, obviously. And I mean, if you just look at what are the concerns of most Americans, right? I mean, they care about the economy. They care about the border. Trump is leading those indicators. That's the first thing. And then
do you agree with me? Yeah. I think he could tip this election decisively if he would just name 2 or 3 members of his cabinet, the AG, the Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of State. I think he could put this thing to bed.
Sure. I think obviously it depends on who he names. I think for you and for you and I think that music to our ears would be Tom Cotton at defense, and they're like, that's it. It's a done deal. I can go to sleep now. That would help.
Yeah, I don't know why he won't do it, but he won't do it. Now, I got to ask you about the fascists who got together at the Madison Square Garden last night. It reminded me so much of 1937 not. I mean, what did you make of the hysteria in the media? Look, there was a bad joke made about Puerto Rico. I'm not going to spend any time on it because it's the undercard, and they obviously didn't vet it, and it was stupid. And comics do stupid stuff like that all the time. But generally, the hysteria about fascism and Trump. What do you make of that, Vic?
Well, again, this was a slapdash operation. I'm talking about the Harris-Walz campaign. And so, I mean, the main strategy, because again, you have these 2 factions running that campaign, which is the Obama people and the Biden people. the strategy has been just to throw up anything on the wall and see what sticks. So again, it started off with, he's a threat to democracy, and then he's weird, and then he's mentally unstable. And then, of course, this has to be the last iteration for them, which is that he's a fascist, and that he likes Hitler. And meanwhile, they were, trying to say that they represent the politics of joy, and all they do is talk about doom and gloom. So again, this is kind of a real stretch if anyone has any knowledge about, those days. You mentioned the American Bund rally with Charles Lindbergh. This is not it. And comparing Trump to Hitler or being a fascist, he has no desire to get into these foreign wars. I mean, that's the one thing that you could say about Donald Trump that we know from his 4 years is he's not one of these big interventionists. And I mean, and that's coming from me as recovering as a neocon. I wish he would do more. But to say that he has this sort of desire to do these kind of things, no, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm older than you, so I'm a Reaganite, Nixonian realist. Use force when you have to. Don't get into wars, and I think that's his approach. It's not particularly neoconish, but it is very Reaganitish. I just think that this last week has, if anyone had any illusions left about bias in the media, they're gone. And I don't know that they're ever going to recover from this. Do you? I really do think legacy media broke itself on Trump. Do you?
Yeah, and I also don't know if they'll ever come to grips and realize that, hey, we really got out of control over here. We crossed the line. It was out of hand, and I need to wake up because, more than half of the country's population has told us they're voting for the guy we said is Hitler. Maybe that tells me something. But it does. It pushed people to become deranged and do things and say things and write things and report things that they never would do. I think about Nora O'Donnell on CBS and her quote unquote, opening regular coverage of what's happening in the news is insanely tilted toward Kamala Harris. Uh, and I know we know journalists who have said in the past, I'll tell you right now, we are not, we don't take sides. We're just calling it as we see it. And that's obviously not true. And you could see how upset they got with all those non endorsements from the LA Times and the Washington Post over the weekend.
Yeah, I don't talk about the Post because I work there, but I will
Oh,
talk
sorry.
about the general unhinged nature of the comment, like Trump going to use the military against people. That's so absurd. Number one, he's not going to do it. Number two, if he tried to do it, the courts would stop him and the military wouldn't obey him. I mean, it's just crazy to say that, to peddle that crap.
Yeah, in fact, I believe there was a full page ad taken in one of the major newspapers, it might have been the New York Times, that gave a
New York
list of
Times.
all the things he is going to do when he comes into office. And first of all, the tone of that ad is he's coming into office. And the second thing is it's just complete panic. He's going to round up his enemies. He's going to, I mean, and in certain things that they say that they don't realize that the Biden Harris team is already doing against Trump, trying to put him in jail. So I mean, obviously, it's completely tone deaf. But yeah, it's just ridiculous.
So big picture question, Vic. Getting Hammered, I don't know how many people download it, but it's very wildly popular and growing. Ruthless is wildly popular and growing. The National Review, the Editors, Commentary Pod, they're all wildly popular and growing. Talk radio is still out there. The Free Beacon now exists as sort of the paper of choice for serious people in D.C. that want a center-right point of view. Does legacy media go away? I mean, I do actually think it might go the way of the Edsel.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously they have to suffer through these rounds of layoffs. They're losing subscribers. Advertising is down, obviously, and if you give in to those impulses and try to cater towards certain readers because they have a certain point of view there of a political bent, you keep on chasing that. It just gets worse and worse, and then every time, in order to keep them as your base, as your subscribers, then you have to shock them even more. And again, I'm not going to mention names of other, sites, but it's not a healthy way to go. And at some point, the owners of these publications, they spend a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. They have to ask themselves, what is it for? And what am I trying to do here? And so the idea, again, they have to realize that it's a bad idea, taking sides rather than just giving us the news.
All right, very last question. Headline:
Yeah.
Chicago Jewish man on way to synagogue shot by attacker shouting "Allahu Akbar." Is that in the Free Beacon today? Is anyone covering this that other than me? It's in the Jerusalem Post. It's been pointed out to me by my friends who cover this sort of thing in Israel. What do you think?
It's shocking. It's not in the news broke that it's not in our morning beacon, but I guarantee you it is something that we'll obviously be looking at. We were covering, anti-Semitic attacks in Michigan, for example, which are horrible. And the poor fellow, I believe, in Los Angeles, who was beaten to death. He was hit by that bullhorn, and the Jewish protester, and he was also killed. Somebody has to say this, and that Legacy is not going to be giving much credence or much coverage to something that is happening out there. And if they do, they'll be very reluctant to reveal anything about the assailant.
Yeah, it's remarkable. The Chicago police have nothing on the assailant thus far. It's been 14, 18 hours. It's been 48 hours because it was Saturday morning, not Sunday morning. Vic Matus, follow him at Victorina Matus on X. Listen to Getting Hammered, subscribe and like it. And thank you, Vic. Talk to you next week. Time for my relief factor. You might say, well, what did you do this weekend? I picked up T-Rex Teddy 5,000 times, and then I picked up the Sweet Girl another 100 times, and my back hurts. So I carried in curcumin resveratrol Omega. There's not my legs. The Marine Corps Marathon was this weekend, and a couple of our relatives and very close friends came over for dinner last night. They were sore, and I told them, good on you. You'll be sore for a week, but good on you. They had great times. But nothing compares to picking up T-Rex 5,000 times. And he's like my shadow when I spend 2 days with him. So I am aching, but my relief factor will get me in the game before the end of the week. I'm on special report tonight. You'll see me kind of moving around this set a little bit like this. Going over to tape the Ruthless podcast today as well for tomorrow. I got a lot to do today, so I had to take my relief factor and get back in the book. Call 1-800, the number 4, the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF to get your starter pack at $19.95. It really works. It doesn't mask pain. It reduces inflammation when you do things like pick up a 2-year-old 1,000 times. And you can go to relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com, find that starter pack button and get started. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, America.